from Warrington, Eruption.
As we enter the top 20 of the list, all three reboot champions of Robot Wars are yet to make an appearance, but it's Eruption that steps forward as the first in line. Unlike its two fellow reboot champions, Eruption entered Robot Wars as a known quantity, having twice won the UK Championship on the live circuit before its televised debut. Expectations were very high for this distinctive hazard stripe flipper, especially under the controls of the quiet but calculated Michael Oates, but things didn't go to plan. As it turned out, one controversial loss to Storm 2 on a judge's decision and a double knockout against PP3D was all it took to stop Eruption from reaching even the Heat final on its debut series. Heat 3rd place was a low finish for a robot that earned the first out of the arena flip in the new Robot Wars arena, and it even took down the eventual champion Apollo in a head-to-head earlier in the episode. But this quaint first campaign may well be the only reason Eruption ranks below the likes of Apollo and Carbide in the list. Nevertheless, Michael Oates did everything in his power to live up to Eruption's reputation in the next two series. As we saw Eruption focus less on its TV gimmicks like the experimental claw and drum weapons and put more attention into the anti-spinner armour, Eruption started to push past almost everything it faced. Earning 4 consecutive out of the arena flips in its Series 9 heat, even avenging a previous loss to PP3D, Eruption continued its momentum across the grand final and collected more elusive wins before only Carbide could put an end to its 8-match winning streak. Certainly the title of UK runner-up was much more befitting than Heat semi-finalist, but Team Eruption were not content to leave with just second place. The determined Eruption made its return to Series 10 with convincing wins over Aftershock and Big Nipper, and although its third lifetime loss to Carbide put Eruption out in the heat for the second time, this would prove to be the final loss Eruption ever suffered on the show. Many machines entered the 10-robot rumble with the hopes of causing mayhem and having fun, but if any one machine was there to win, it was Eruption. A tactical victory saw Michael Oates hide in the background in the early stages before capitalising on his weakened foes to become the last robot standing and the wildcard grand finalists. One final climb saw the team reach their second title fight with Carbide, and after 3 one-sided losses, many had written Eruption off before the battle had even begun. Little did we know Eruption would learn from its mistakes and take Carbide head-on in a 3-minute slugfest, and a close judge's decision finally declared Eruption the Robot Wars champion. Truly, this was such a well-deserved title for Eruption, and one which Michael Oates may well hold for the rest of time.
Carbide, this is a technical turn for you, are running away! They are running away, the champions! Run away and try and dodge the trouble caused by that mean and merciless Michael Oates at the control of a water. Finally goes to the judges.
Okay, well, as you know, it went to a judge's decision, and that decision was unanimous. Eruption!
From Branston, Lincoln, Stinger.
Smashing in next is Stinger, a real surprise package. Stinger was the first robot that we, the audience, were introduced to in Series 3, and it left about as quickly as it arrived, losing after a mere 50-second clash with Mace 2. After this performance, it is understandable how many might be confused as to why it is placed so high on this list, and no one could have expected what was to come a mere 1 year later. In Series 4, Stinger ditched the pizza cutter disc they had in Series 3 for a heavier, clubbing mace. Add that to the fact that Kevin Scott had mastered the controls of his machine, and Stinger had gone from an uncontrollable laughingstock to one of the deadliest forces in the wars. Sure, it was still crazy and a great joy to watch, but it could now back up that craziness by KOing robots in one of the most brutal ways possible, bludgeoning them to death. Much like a UFC fighter, Stinger's tactics were to simply beat the living daylights out of each opponent it faced until they stopped twitching. And this tactic proved to be very viable overall, as Stinger went from being a first round dropout to a grand finalist placing 3rd overall. It even gave Chaos 2 its toughest battle up to that point, narrowly losing a very close judge's decision. Stinger also brought its own fan club to the Series 4 audience and had a mild celebrity status at the time. During its introduction in its Heat Final battle with Bulldog Breed, several audience members could be heard chanting, "Stinger, Stinger, he's our man, if he can't do it, no one can." Even legends like Chaos 2, Razor and Hypnotist didn't get chants like that. Sadly, in Series 5 and 6, Stinger had, for the most part, become relatively outdated, and despite taking out strong robots like Thermidor and Fluffy, it fell at the Heat final stage in both of these series, and the team ultimately decided not to enter Series 7. Despite this, however, Stinger's crazy antics, intriguing design, and brutal KO strategy cemented it into the memories of many Robot Wars fans.
Stinger, a side attack on the Bulldog. The jaws of the Bulldog are open. CO2 being vented there!
From Nottingham and Cambridge, Mortis.
Deep down, Robot Wars has always been a sport promoted for the grassroots. Encouraging children and their dads to build a robot from whatever scrap is lying around and whatever spare change can buy on top. On the other end of the scale was Mortis. Mortis was iconic for plenty of reasons, but this machine and team stood out from the very start of the show's lifespan because of that magic word, money. While even the champions of Series 1, Roadblock, was made of literal road signs, Mortis came in from the off of its aerospace grade materials and devilish Tanto-Axe blade. Add Rob Knight's intentionally arrogant attitude and Mortis was just begging to be the villains of the early years. Many a Roboteer and fan enjoyed poking fun at the team and cheering on each other to beat Mortis. And on paper, Mortis should have dominated the first few series of the show, but things never quite went to plan for Rob Knight, Arthur Chilcott and company. Not only was Mortis expensive, but it was also involved in controversy. Series 1 saw a particularly infamous judge's decision loss to Recyclops, while Series 2 involved an arena spike in the pinball, napalm and a whole lot of ugliness. These two events were so noteworthy that Mortis settled grudges with both teams as part of the Grudge Matches special at the end of Series 2. By the end of the UK Championships in Series 4, Mortis had gone from an overwhelming favourite to falling behind the rest of the pack. Inconsistency and unreliability saw it drop out to Gravedigger and Steg 2 in its respective Series 3 and 4 heats, and the First World Championship also passed the team by with another convincing defeat at the hands of Behemoth. For such a complex machine that was so far ahead of its time, Mortis had never made use of the tools at its disposal. Its career had faded away. But Mortis saved the best until last. Its final ever tournament saw it represent the UK in the War of Independence, and here Mortis shone, and not just against the Americans. Just when it was least expected, Mortis pulled out some two absolutely classic performances, first inflicting telling damage to Panic Attack's lifting actuator, before absolutely dominating the highly rated American Frenzy in the final to bring home the trophy for the UK. Mortis went out with a rare honour of its last ever battle being a win, and although there were rumours of a return to the show, Mortis never did come back. Despite never making a step over into the 100kg era, Mortis perfectly represented the era it was a part of. It was a notable name in the show's history, and even when its results started to tail off and it was the underdog in fights, any defeats it suffered were still considered shocks and notable moments by the show itself. For being a rare villain in the garage aesthetic era of the show, Mortis stood out, and whether it stood out for good or for bad, Mortis always ensured it was memorable while doing it.
Still the repetitive bash of the Mortis axe. Well, they've been around Robot Wars, the scene, for so many years. The Mortis boys, without really ever doing themselves justice or picking up any honours. But I think here, they've got this War of Independence. They certainly have Frenzy on the run. Can they flip them up and over using the long arm? They're over! Now can Frenzy right itself using the weapon? The soft underbelly of Frenzy is exposed. In goes the Mortis axe. It's the Woody Woodpecker song from Mortis.
From Bodmin Community College, our reigning champion, Roadblock.
Roadblock has icon status written across it like a road sign. Even aside from being the first UK champion, it was the first robot to complete the gauntlet, the first to fell a house robot, the first to win a battle, and the first competitor ever to appear on screen. A huge wedge with a sense of inevitability to its ponderous offense, there were few robots who survived when the Series 1 Titan turned their way. In just 2 series, Roadblock set a 7 straight battle winning streak against no less than 8 teams who would become seasoned veterans in their own right. In the 6-way grand final of Series 1, Roadblock single-handedly felled the robots of Rex Garrod and George Francis, and sent the team who would build Pussycat fleeing with their tails between their legs, the most dominant grand final display until Carbide almost 20 years later. Retiring from combat without ever falling off the podium and collecting only a single loss in its entire career, Roblox was still referenced for years after it retired, being the oldest machine mentioned in the Ultimate Guide. The definition of simple but effective, Roblox was a role model for Robot Wars, and in relative terms, there are few robots in the show's history that were as far ahead of the competition as Roblox was.
Recyclops, top of your picture. There's the chain off Recyclops! And that attacking by Roadblock has paid off. Recyclops is out. They're down to 3. Body hammer. Roadblock behind it. And there's Robot the Bruce up on his side and goes as well. And that leaves 2. The Roadblock team of students from Bodmin against the team of nuclear engineers and Body hammer. Here's Roadblock closing in on the far more experienced engineering team, getting in underneath. It's over. It goes to the judges. And the arena on its feet, a standing ovation.
All right, quieten down, everybody. Quieten down. We have a decision. A unanimous one from the judges that the winner, the British Robot Wars champion, Series 1, is Roadblock! You did it, guys! You did it! There it is, the trophy. And a very, very well-earned one, if I may be so bold.
From Chertsey in Surrey and number 5 seed, Dan Tomkier.
Named after Michael Lambert's 3 children, Daniel, Thomas and Kira, Dan Tomkier is arguably the most famous robot to debut in Series 6, and was one of the last robots to truly establish itself as an all-star in the classic era of Robot Wars, going from newcomer to all-stars runner-up with a killer pullback toy in the space of just 2 years. To this day, Dan Tomkier remains the king of the out of the arenas, throwing 9 of its opponents out of the arena on TV, more than Firestorm or Eruption or Apollo, more than any other robot. One of its very first was against the then record holder and 2-time champions Chaos 2, in a battle that stunned many and signalled a real changing of the guard. With its distinct chiselled front, powerful flipper and hyper-aggression, Dan Tomkier chucked 8 other opponents out, including IG-88 in 8 seconds, a record for the time, although ironically in its next fight, Dan Tomkier itself was thrown out of the arena in the fastest ever fight of the classic era against Gravity. With a new team in Series 8, Dan Tomkier showed it was still capable of holding its own, but age had clearly caught up to it in the wake of the more modern flippers like TR2. Despite this, within 2 main series and an Extreme, Dan Tomkier has already established itself as one of the most memorable and powerful machines of the classic era, taking on almost all of the big names with absolutely no fear. Michael Lambert often spoke about being a nervous driver, but that didn't appear to be the case once Dan Tomkier was in the arena. While it was never able to secure a trophy beyond the most promising newcomer of Series 6, and a featherweight title with DTK, Dan Tomkier truly earned its place among legends within our top 20.
For Chaos 2 to get in underneath and flick, but both flick themselves up and over there, and it comes shunted to the CPZ. Who's going to right themselves first? Dan Tomkier springing and jumping, so Killalot comes out. Chaos 2 is on the arena sidewall here. We've got some drama in that CPZ, I can tell you. Dan Tomkier, okay, they're first up and away, and they'll come in now with a full frontal slam on Chaos 2. Chaos 2 trying to flip themselves. Now they have a limited CO2 supply, don't forget. They can't keep trying to right themselves, Chaos 2, and use that flip. But Dan Tomkier, and they're out, over and out. Chaos 2 have gone. For the first time ever, that machine has failed to reach a series semi-final. And Dan Tomkier, Michael Lambert, Daniel his son, Stephen Gadsby, brilliant. Dan Tomkier through to the series semi. What a performance, what a machine.
From Oxford in Oxfordshire, TERRORHURTZ.
It creates terror and hurts. That was one of Jonathan Pierce's introductions for this machine, and by watching it in action, you could easily understand why. TERRORHURTZ came about from the creative mind of John Reed, and almost immediately reached the standards of which Kilohertz never could, sealing John Reed's place as one of the elite minds on the show. TERRORHURTZ's Series 6 campaign especially was one of unparalleled violence and dominance from an Axbot. A ruthless first round melee display was relatively calm compared to the dominance that followed. TERRORHURTZ bashed and beat down the legendary Panic Attack before stepping up to the plate even more in the semi-finals. Crumble under the pressure? Hardly. TERRORHURTZ continued a dominant campaign right through to the top 4, only to be undone by the reigning champions Razor, who were even scared of TERRORHURTZ themselves. Going forward, TERRORHURTZ was unable to reach these same heights ever again, though not for the lack of trying. Even as a robot combat trophy eluded TERRORHURTZ in Extreme 2, it still always provided moments of devastation that still made people fall in love with it all over again. There was almost no weapon more devastating and enjoyable to watch than when TERRORHURTZ's axe was in full form, repeatedly raining down on opponents like Smidzy, Vader and Dan Tomkia. The reboot TERRORHURTZ was a different type of package, one with a more methodical style, an emphasis on its front armour, and John Reed turning into a meme. TERRORHURTZ managed to be the only robot to ever defeat Carbide via a knockout, and a fully functioning Carbide at that. Good axe bots were rather in a short supply on the show, and in the British robot combat scene in general, but even in its last series where axes could not make a scratch on most robots' armour, TERRORHURTZ was still able to deal out significant damage to Apex and Vulture. For being an axe like no other, and for squeezing out the limits of power from a weapon type so often doubted, TERRORHURTZ earns its place in our top 15.
Look at that! Absolutely hammering into the protective armament of Smidzy. Smidzy can't do anything really. It has been absolutely mullered out there. TERRORHURTZ have destroyed Smidzy. They can't get going. Look at the axe! They'll push Tornado very hard if they can get that far. They've still got to beat Dan Tomkia. There's no question in my mind they'll beat Smidzy. Is there any question in your mind? Basically, Smidzy, you need the arena floor to collapse and TERRORHURTZ to go down a very, very big, black and endless hole for you to stand any chance.
From Stowmarket, Cassius.
Building off the success of his previous spot in Cyclops, Rex Garrett's Cassius marked an important evolution in robot combat, refining and rationalising the pneumatic flipper into what could arguably be called the first wedge flipper. Combining this with an innovative pneumatic suspension system allowing it to change its ground clearance on a whim, Cassius was one of the most impressive feats of engineering of the early series of Robot Wars, and quickly established itself as a real competitor. Debuting in Series 2, Cassius breezed through its heat, and when flipped by Sir Kilowat in the semi-finals, it changed Robot Wars forever when it pulled off the first ever self-fighting seen in the show.
Goes beyond the ramp, turns up, brilliant! Superb gymnastics from Cassius! The little backflip was super! Let's have a look, hey! How about that, break dancing from Rex Garrett and Cassius!
After a particularly nervy fight which ultimately saw it overcome reigning champions roadblock, Cassius met Panic Attack in the title fight where an unfortunate bit of dodgy driving allowed Kim Davies an opportunity to pick Cassius and claim the trophy. Cassius returned in Series 3 looking even more impressive, its fin lifting arm replaced by a broader panel and with an array of new features such as an anti-pit device, but sadly a deep run was not to be. Against the incredibly invertible Pussycat, Cassius, easily capable of another grand final run, dove right into the pit in one of the most shocking displays of driving the show ever saw, and after Rex quit the show in protest of poor health and safety standards backstage, Cassius was never to feature again. Just on its record alone, Cassius is well deserving of this spot. It paved the way for all the flippers that followed, and was without a doubt one of the most impressive bots of its time. However, credit must also be given to the man behind the machine, Rex Garrett. From his constant pushing of technological boundaries to his love of fighting the house robots, Rex embodied the madcap ingenuity and playfulness that makes robot combat so great. When the sad news of his death came out in 2019, British builders at BattleBots, many of whom grew up watching Cassius's run on Robot Wars, wrote messages of tribute and remembrance on their machines, a testament to the enduring impact of Rex and his machine.
But knowing
not
you,
really his fault.
Knowing you, you're going to go and help everyone else with their robots now, aren't you?
Well, that's the usual way.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're great.
From Brighton at East Sussex and the number 2 seed, Bigger Brother.
Wouldn't we all like to have a bigger brother like this? The second machine from Joe and Ian Watts was by far the most impressive that the family ever produced. The self-declared Nightmare and Metal debuted in Series 4 as the successor to the team's original Big Brother, and was one of many machines to start taking cues from Chaos 2. The Series 4 iteration was reasonable for its time, but it was the Series 5 version which boosted its weight and its flipper and became a true all-star in its own right. Bigger Brother Series 5 campaign is one of the best in the show's history, with 2 out of the arena flips and 2 of the biggest scalps in the history of the show. First eliminating 2-time reigning champion Chaos 2 and finally ending the George Francis run, before pulling off the greatest comeback in the show's history in an all-time classic fight with Hypnodisc. Literally falling to pieces, the cool heads of driver Ian and flipper operator Joe, who was not even 10 years old, consider that when you think about how much you've achieved, were able to shove Hypnodisc into the pit and claim a top 2 finish against Razor. One of the most lovable teams in the show, Joe and Ellie were favourites of Craig Charles and Philippa Forrester, and the robot fittingly took out a side tournament called the Minor Meltdown in Extreme 2 with the kids at the controls. Bigger Brother's career after the Hypnodisc fight was steady if not spectacular, dotted with remarkable fights like an Uter on S3, a KO defeat of then champion Tornado, and then overturning the eventual champion in Typhoon 2 in its first fight of Series 7. Bigger Brother's career as a flash of lightning, a remarkable impression left in a robot in a surprisingly little amount of time.
And something flew out of Bigger Brother there, some sort of mesh I think it was. Will Ellie be looking now? Hypnodisc seems to be a bit more wary, and I'll tell you what, despite all the damage, Bigger Brother are still fighting on. I wouldn't have minded a Bigger Brother like this. And they've got enough confidence to go for the pit release button, have they? Are they going to nudge Hypnodisc onto the pit release? What a fight back! Oh, Hypnodisc is on the verge of going down. What an upset! Bigger Brother have beaten Hypnodisc. Ellie, look again. Hypnodisc are out. You've done it. You've won it. What a stunner!
It doesn't get more sensational than that! Hypnodisc consigned to the pit of oblivion. Bigger Brother gone through to the grand final.
From Langport, Wheelie Big Cheese.
The UK scene is known to be flipper heavy. Most of these machines have a similar design philosophy. A panel that is part of the machine thrusts upward, retracts back into place, and can self-right when inverted. But our number 12 isn't like that. Oh no, not one bit. Step forward, Wheelie Big Cheese. Wheelie Big Cheese came off the back of the Big Cheese, a machine which was a powerful piece of machinery itself. But what Roger Plant really wanted was to get one over on the baddest bot around, Sir Kill-A-Lot. So he devised a completely unique flipper robot. Instead of going with the basic flipper formula, Roger Plant thought, what about if my entire machine was a flipper? And that's exactly what he made, with Wheelie Big Cheese sporting a lengthy, double-jaw wedge of a body and striking, studded titanium wheels. Chaos 2 may have been the champion, but Wheelie Big Cheese was aiming to push flippers to their peak, something it helped show with its mighty flips on Killertron and Tornado in its debut campaign. And despite a disappointing Extreme campaign, Wheelie Big Cheese came into Series 5 with experience under its belt and refinements made. Well, if your definition of refinement is the ability to hurl a machine into the air and out of the arena within the opening 15 seconds, that is. Wheelie Big Cheese's mammoth flip on Axaw stands out as one of the most iconic attacks in the show's history, and the single best flip too. At its best, Wheelie Big Cheese was a monster, and it looked like Series 5 could well be its year when it easily chucked around Crustacean in the Heat final, before once again sending a machine sky high in its semi-final bout with Dominator 2. However, Wheelie Big Cheese was also known for its reliability issues, and that's exactly what hurt it in the remainder of the fight against Dominator 2, and also led to limp defeats in the Losers Melee and the Extreme Flipper Frenzy. But despite its reliability problems, the lack of maneuverability, and the general patchy battle record, Wheelie Big Cheese was still the machine to watch in its day. Even to this day, over 15 years on, the bar that many fans sets for a UK flipper bot is to reach the power, or the heights more precisely, that Wheelie Big Cheese showed it was capable of. And for that, we give a really big thumbs up to this particular Roger Plant creation.
Is the quicker machine, both 99 kilos, both from Langport in Somerset. Axel flipped, oh goodness me, by Wheelie Big Cheese! That has to be a Robot Wars record flip! Look at the distance achieved here! That is immense!
of the arena, out of the Robot Wars galaxy.
Cease.
Huge power.
Well, I've seen it all now. Did you see how high that robot flew? It must have been 12 seconds and 15 feet. The winner is Wheelie Big Cheese.
From North Wales, Apollo.
The first 3 episodes of the reboot felt very much like the Robot Wars Evolved, full of competitive designs using their weapons to inflict carnage on the warzone. We had new robots to inherit the mantles of Hypnodisc and Tornado, but there was still that lack of a CASSIUS or a Panic Attack. The kind of machine that would not only get stuck into its opponents, but also their house robots. So, step forward Team Mad and Apollo. The perfect blend of banter and brutal, Apollo's team were a genuine delight to watch on screen, and there were few Roboteers as fun to root for, while still maintaining high standards in the arena. And oh boy, did Apollo ever deliver on that combat front. It stomped PP3D in a truly remarkable display of flipper form, humiliated the otherwise undefeated TR2, and then it overcame Carbide to claim the Series 8 champion title. It was in the battles with Storm 2, however, that Apollo really made their statement, showing that the minimalistic Rambot design could not only be beaten, but dominated by a robot with a big weapon and big ambitions. Apollo went on to claim the honour of flipping not 1, not 2, but 3 of the Reboot House robots, the only one of the reboots to pull off the feat at all. Apollo's in Series 9 and 10 was just as big. Burr was unable to defeat Carbide's or Aftershock Unit's title defense, and then had its redemption cut short at the hands of Behemoth in its first campaign. Apollo was still always a threat to competitors and house robots alike, with the show especially promoting Apollo's ambitions to flip Sir Killalot. Though this was never successfully achieved, Apollo continued to provide us memorable duels with every house robot, and in the process, it reminded us that the fundamentals of Robot Wars could never be retired, and that entertainment was always the most important thing on this particular Robot Combat show.
Apollo drives into the CPs. How dare you! Dead Metal venting its spleen and steam! And why not? Goodness me! Apollo, meanwhile, is trying to stay away from any damage Storm 2 can cause, and pushed on to Matilda. Were they going to flip Matilda? I think they were. I think they got too confident there. Ah, they've done it! A KO blow for the second time. They've taken just about everyone out.